Welcome, everyone. Keeping with the theme, we are advancing research at QuestionPro, and I'm going to talk about a feature called Nps Plus. Again, before we get started, um, don't hesitate to raise your hand. I'm used to being in front of an audience, both remote and in person. I've one of the few people that have been working remote for 22 years now, so it's something I'm sort of used to. Happy to interact, happy to ask questions live or by chat. Happy to answer questions after the fact as well. So a little bit about me. I actually didn't come from a traditional market research background. I started in operations. I was working for a retailer using KPIs and numbers to assess efficiencies in supply chains and processes that help the retailer get product to places where it needed to be and make sure that all the functions were working properly. So I actually sort of joined CX to help a friend improve a process. That might be shocking for someone with an operations background, improving processes. That improvement sort of moved me to build way back in 1998 a CX reporting website notification system that was in HTML 1.0 and using SQL Server, and it was very rudimentary. If anyone is familiar with HTML 1.0, and since then I've sort of worked on all sides of the business. Research management, technology implementations, led business units, and even worked on some of the largest mergers in our industry. I've pretty much seen it all from all directions of the CX business, both as a consumer of CX research as well as administering it through all different phases of the process. So I was actually thrilled when Vivek invited me to joined QuestionPro earlier this year and lead CX. And, it is that singular effort of advancing research. And you saw a lot of great examples that Dan went through in terms of advancing research, helping us become better researchers. And that is my goal and focus with CX as well. How can we improve the CX research that we're doing? And having worked in this area, to me, again, from an operations background, the biggest gap always comes in action. What actions do we take? And, that has us looking at things like closed loop feedback, improving that, getting at root cause, being able to identify things there, using AI to discover insights instead of having to mine and spend endless hours looking for that little nugget of truth. And of course, improving the surveying process is a key function in that. And that's sort of what's so exciting about NPS Plus. And anyone that's familiar with NPS, I mean, it's been around for 16 years, roughly 2003, 2004, it was introduced to the world. And it's a methodology that is great because it helps you identify where you stand, and also gives you a relative comparison against your competitors. It can give you a relative comparison against each other. And for the most part, it really helps look at an industry-wide instead of just a central internal view, which I think is very important. But one of the things that I've always said is it intentionally includes looking at what we call the passives. I mean, there's a 0 through 6, which we call the detractors. We do closed loop feedback with them. We follow up with them. We try and take that bad experience and turn it good. We have the promoters, the 9s and 10s, the ones that we're thrilled with, the ones that show that we're doing a good job with our customers. And I always say this in jest a little bit. I'm a middle child, and I made this comment in joking around one day. Nope said, nope, we're running with it. And it is, passives are the forgotten middle child in the NPS model, and they truly are. They're not part of the computation, although indirectly they really are. But it turned into a way to explore using a change in how we look at surveys, and how, for those filling them out, how we can better analyze the data and better leverage the data. And that's really the core of what we were trying to get at with NPS Plus. So a little bit of why NPS Plus. For any of you that have taken some surveys, particularly if you're in the business-to-business world and do a survey, if you sometimes fly on an airline, those surveys are ridiculously long. Coming from someone who I probably get peppered with about 20 to 25 surveys per week. Just in the normal course of my business. Now I notice when I'm being asked to do this, and I recognize the importance, and I really try to make a concerted effort to participate in these surveys. One, because I become a better CX researcher by completing CX surveys, but two, I understand the value of the data that is coming from these surveys and how it helps the organization be better to their customers. So I get it, but one of the things that has happened is these surveys have become so long sometimes. We get attribute after attribute. We have question after question of data that we should already know about our customers. So we really wanted to make the transactional customer experience survey shorter, keeping with that original NPS promise of one question, one open end. We've added a few little nuances in there, removed the redundant, boring matrix questions that sometimes really get lost because people click through them and really don't focus on what they're answering rather than focus on getting through the survey. And then taking it again beyond detractors and looking at what I call the at-risk passives, people that look like a detractor even though they classify themselves as a passive in the survey, and understanding the risk of churn and of course the financial impact that comes along with that. Now, what is NPS Plus? And I'm going to go through this in a little bit of detail and show you some of the screens. But instead of a barrage of attribute questions, we created a single 3-step question that has the standard NPS rating that we're all used to, along with the open-end feedback. But then we added 2 little elements. One is root cause identification. So instead of that series of questions that we try to correlate, and let's face it, sometimes they're either highly correlated, a lot of multicollinearity, even in regression analysis, it really doesn't churn a lot of insights because people speed through them sometimes, but provide a definitive selection and make that respondent, make our customer say, there is one thing that stood out, whether it's a positive or a negative. And then finally, when we look at how we conduct discussions online, and as Dan was talking about within communities, there's certainly some tools that we sort of looked at and said, this would be great for our customers to be able to collaborate with each other, look at what each other is saying and saying, that's a good idea. And so we took that idea of voting within the communities and brought it to our CX and our NPS Plus platform. So let me show you how it sets up. It's very easy. It's an easy interface. And if you're at all familiar with our platform, the interface is very, add the question and it's there. It's very easy to fill in the blanks where you need to fill them in. This comes pre-filled out, so you don't have to do too much work, but you can certainly customize the prompts, customize the interactions so that when someone hovers over one of the responses, it gives them an idea of what they're responding to and gives them an idea of how they're answering the question for you. The second part of it is customizing the request for an open-end follow-up. And that's so often overlooked. A lot of NPS programs out there just ask the question, why did you rate us that way? But we want to get into more detail. We want to customize it so it says, tell us where we can improve. If someone has rated you a 9 or a 10, you don't say, where can we improve? You say, what did we do well? What stood out to you? Things like that really allow it to make a better feel and a better, as we call it, customer experience, which we'll have to probably call that CX squared at some point. And then finally, the voting idea, you can turn that on or off. What we really like about the voting is that it does give your customers the ability to sort of collaborate, co-create, and look at ideas that others may have come up with and say, that's a good idea. Look at those ideas and accept and reject them. And that way you have a sort of I'll call it an impromptu focus group with some customer comments, and being able to pull that in and say, hey, everyone likes this idea. Someone mentioned the best way that we can improve the company is to provide this service to them, and really see if some ideas take off, and it allows you to do that. So, and then what it looks like from the survey experience, a very smooth, streamlined experience. Not if you've seen our platform, and if you haven't, I'm more than happy to walk you through a demonstration of our CX platform. It is It makes it a lot easier for the customers to complete this survey. And literally, we've been testing it out, and it's a 2 to 3 minute survey, and that's what we want our customers to do. Take 2 to 3 minutes to give us feedback on a transaction. So it's a format that customers are familiar with, and we're also going to look to adjust that in the future. We're talking about ways to make it more interactive, more idealistic, but for now, when they select the option, the next thing they're going to see is that root cause box. It's a clean list. It forces them into one answer, what's most applicable to them. And then it includes an other box. So, we're not putting them into one set of responses, because while we all know our business really well, and I can take that from my experience in working in the retail business, we knew our business inside and out. What we didn't know is, what did customers want that we didn't know about, that we weren't asking about? So we of course include that other box, and then getting that open-end comment, and then being able to transition that to really getting the understanding of the ideas the customers like. And we give them 5 votes. They can award them all to one idea, or in some cases, they can go ahead and take them and award them across multiple ideas, do 2 points to one, 3 points to the other, however they want. Now, that's just about the survey experience, but while we feel that this has really improved that, it's being able to take and get a lot more information out of what we used to call a lot less survey real estate, as we call it. Shortening the survey, especially if you want to get a lot more responses from your customers for transactions that maybe don't require that big of a commitment. You definitely want something like this where it's short, easy, and you can repeat it again and again, and it's fun, because I like voting on other people's comments as well. So it really brings that experience to a different light. But reporting is probably the most valuable part of this. I mean, it's available across your hierarchy dashboards. It's available to you. It's helpful in making decisions globally and locally. And again, if you're familiar with the CX dashboards tools, this screen will look familiar. It's easy to add it to any dashboard. You just click on that one, and it's ready. It knows if you have that question in place, and it can easily add it. And once you get in there, the multitude of information. Now, keep in mind, this is just one little question set, and what we're providing here and what we're pushing out there is quite a bit of information. First, there's of course the NPS, looking at the trend, being able to see the details in that trend, being able to hover over and pop up, look at what the NPS is, the individual passive, detractor, and promoters in an individual month. So all the details that you would expect to see in NPS, but then we take it a step further and go into the root cause. Now, the root cause, knowing not only what is coming to the top is important, but where it's trending. And that's why we thought it was important to make sure that you see items that come and go. I mean, as a business, you certainly recognize certain things that you can't plan for. Say, a pandemic might happen, and you have to change your business and shift where you're thinking, shift what you have to approach the customers with, and the policies and how they should be updated. So being able to look at those trends and identify them, and actually be able to drill down into them and see, passives and detractors, we're grouping them together in this case. And that's on purpose, which I'll discuss in a moment, but being able to get down into that detail and say, this is how promoters are seeing the world, and these are the things that they're saying that are positive, but also with the passives and detractors, what is causing them the pain? And the reason that becomes important, because once we start talking about pain, churn is the next question that comes to mind. Now, clearly, detractors have something that they take issue with your company, with how you're doing business with them, with the service that was provided. What often is overlooked, that middle child, the added benefit of understanding those root causes in passives, because there's a lot of passives that look an awful lot like detractors. Now, it's an easy view into the financial impact. No one wants churn, but you can see if you have 30% of your customers at a risk of churn, there has to be action has to be taken. And we'll always have some detractors. We'll always have some likely customers that are going to churn. It could be for a variety of reasons, but the passives really can be pushed in two directions. They become promoters or they become detractors. And if they start responding to root cause analysis in a way that they look like detractors, we want to make sure we pay attention to that and be able to dig into the details and be able to pull them up and not just look at detractors. I mean, we can easily and automatically create a closed loop feedback ticket for a detractor, but then also identify those that are at risk because of their root causes and actually create tickets, find a way to not only make that customer happy, maybe even turn them into promoter because they weren't a detractor to begin with, but they were getting close. And then being able to take action on it and being able to, stop any potential loss before it becomes that loss. And then being able to use those root causes and then the innovation and co-creation for your customers, which we talked about before with the voting, the communities, the up and down. These items, when we talk about that, they could be items from the root cause where they expand and give a little more detail. Or it could be a great idea, as I mentioned, that you've never even thought of, a service that you never realized that your customers wanted. So being able to look at that and break it down across multiple areas, a drill down to see who's upvoting ideas. You can see if a passive or a detractor is upvoting the idea, which might lead to service improvement. And if it's promoters and passives that are upvoting the idea, it's something that they're probably willing to pay a little extra for. If you brought it to the market for them. So this idea can come from anywhere, and the need for action can easily be determined by you by seeing what kind of behaviors they're responding to, what kind of ideas that are being generated within there. And so there are no real huge limits on the potential upside of this. And keep in mind, all of this is coming from one question. So you can really take it and then edit, based on your enterprise's specific needs. There's functions in there if you want to get more ideas, how much trend, how long you want the trend to be, and evaluate the ideas. So I really enjoy the idea that you can take something that seems so simple and be able to pull something together, make the transactional customer experience surveys shorter, while also removing some of the redundancy, enhancing what we're offering to all the customers, including those middle childs, being able to take some of these ideas and make them into a reality for QuestionPro's customers has been one of the great things that we're trying to do in advancing the research, and then being able to ultimately apply it to the churn risk analysis, which really has the financial implications that we're all looking for, not only to justify what we're doing in terms of the spend on CX, but also make ourselves a better company for our customers. So I promised everyone I would try to wrap up sooner rather than later, so I could take questions and everyone could get a few minutes break in here. But I certainly would love to open it up to questions and see if we have any coming up.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions that came in. Anna, do you want to unmute yourself? Okay, I know. Hold on.
Hi, Ken. Thank you very much for showing all this appreciation for NPS. I really love the idea of NPS Plus. However, my biggest concern as someone who's coming from a research background is not when it comes to building the questionnaire or reporting, but when it comes to the efficient channel of communication, when it comes to distributing this survey and collecting the responses. So from your experience, what do you find is the most efficient way the companies should use to collect the biggest possible amount of responses?
Well, that's a loaded question because it always depends on industry, first of all. But certainly the two most prominent ways to get feedback and get people to respond to feedback are obviously going to be email contact and SMS, where you have defined way to contact them. There's a place where you can actually add to the body of the text. I know there's been a lot of other approaches that are used out there in the social media channels. Things like WhatsApp we can actually interact with it through SMS. There's ways to get to some of these social media channels, but certainly when it comes to talking to your own customers, having a direct way to contact them usually is the most efficient, most effective, and gives you the best response rate. There are other, I'll call more anonymous approaches. And what I tend to call those, I call them comment card approaches. There's something where I know I'm just adding to the number of years of experience I have in this industry now, but way back in the day, that's what was at the end of every experience, whether it was a retail visit, even at a movie theater, you'd walk out and there was a comment card that you could fill out and drop it in a box. It was up to you if you left your name or not to be contacted. But those anonymous approaches have become more digital, I'll call it. You can have responses where you can capture feedback on websites, which is terrific if you're looking at a customer that perhaps is looking to abandon a cart or looks like they're going to exit the page. There's a way to prompt them and say, hey, what was it that was missing? Were you just researching? So being able to get feedback like that anonymously, and you can actually turn the anonymous into non-anonymized if you're able to capture them. There's of course the email receipts, or the receipts, the printed receipts, where at the bottom there's an invitation to an anonymous URL. And but certainly the top two easily. I'd say number one is actually probably SMS. Number two is probably email in terms of response rates. Volume usually favors, overall volume usually favors email, just because so many more companies have their customers' email addresses rather than mobile numbers.
Thank you, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, hi, Ken.
Yes.
Chris here. Thank you for that really engaging presentation. Just one question regarding churn risk. What would you say would be an industry that will fit this well with? I saw that it was. I think I was looking at some restaurant or food related business, but what other businesses would be benefiting from this kind of survey?
So I'm gonna name a few. It's not to say that they're the only ones, but some places where it's succeeded.
Yes.
Obviously, retail. You mentioned food service, and that's an easy one, as well as grocery retail and soft goods retail, clothing stores and such. Another area, financial services, where it's been really strong, and that's a situation where you know who your customers are, you know when they have a transaction clearly. So being able to get that feedback, it's a terrific interruption, I'll say, into getting that feedback, because banks aren't usually known as being the warm and friendly types. So being able to add it to something like a banking transactional survey really gives that ability to set, narrow down on one or two things. So when we're talking about the root cause and the churn of risk there, I may have mentioned it during the conversation, but travel is also one of those where anything from hotels to airlines to some of where actually we have this rolled out amongst a very large number of Canadian tourist attractions, where they want to know, once you visit, it really is applied to COVID conditions and safety conditions. That's what all the root cause questions are all about, to make sure that they're being able to respond to concerns, because in this day and age with the pandemic, people do want to get out, but if they get out and find that the conditions aren't what they want, they probably won't go back even after the pandemic. So being able to address conditions like that immediately are very helpful. And I think another one, streaming services, which may seem like a bit of a niche, but they're quite popular with several hundred of them now. But being able to know that things like variety selection, or in some cases, I won't name the name of the company, but they're losing subscribers because of a movie they were promoting on their platform. And being able to know that ahead of time and say, hey, this is something we have to respond to and take action with is critical.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
did that answer your question for you?
Yes, Kenneth, absolutely. Thank you so much for that insight.
Absolutely. I did see one other question that came in on chat. Can I get a list of customers at risk without having to contact the QuestionPro team? Absolutely, and I should probably move back to that page just so you can see it. We have right within that, right there, that page right there, you can actually just get that list of customers, export it, and be able to contact and respond. You can also set up tickets within the closed loop feedback within the CX platform for QuestionPro. And then another question, are you tracking customers based on a specific weightage or is it passive? Can you elaborate more on the churn risk calculation? So in terms of tracking the customers, again, if it's an anonymous survey, which this works both for anonymous and non-anonymous, if it's an anonymous survey, you're not necessarily tracking customers, but you're able to identify locations where there are service failures. We just mentioned restaurants as one of those areas where you don't necessarily know who responded with the anonymous survey, but you are able to find specific locations that are failing in very specific areas and fix those. So there is no weighting there. Certainly, we can do what's called weighted NPS and also add custom variables into the system for customers that you know to be able to really cut the NPS Plus results at one more level and filter it within the dashboard. So all the filters that you have within your QuestionPro dashboard can be applied to this NPS Plus dashboard widget as well. And then elaborating more on some of the churn risk calculation, it actually is a fairly simple yet extremely complex calculation. I know, I love that, oxymoron right there, but it really looks at and evaluates what the detractors are saying that are causing their pain. And then it selects those on a couple of bases. It finds the top 5, the top 10, the top percentage based on either a threshold that you set percentage-wise or relative threshold based on ranking. And then it looks at the passives and say which passives look like that one as well. And so it's about being able to say, it's really a comparison analysis and then identifying the passives that look like the detractors and then being able to classify them together. And we accomplish that by having the same root cause list that we have for passives as we would for detractors. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Kenneth, for explaining that. I put that question. I just wanted to ask which license we need to use for it if it is already available.
You'll need the customer experience license. This is exclusively available through the customer experience platform.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And then I had one more come in. Someone asked privately, why would you want to make the survey so short? Well, I say it's selfish of me because as I mentioned, I do take just about every survey that comes in. So let's keep them shorter so you can save me a little time. But honestly, if we want customers, there was a question about the best response rates and where you're going to get responses from. If we took the time to think about the survey experience from our customer's point of view, we want to make it easy. We don't want a 10-minute survey for what amounts to a 10-minute interaction. I get a lot of anonymous surveys through the supermarket I shop at. Oftentimes, I'm going through self-checkout. I'm grabbing 2 or 3 items that I need. How long did it really take out of my day? And I won't name the company, but they have about a 40-question survey that concludes with every transaction. We really shouldn't be asking our customers to make that much of an effort to communicate with us. That's the importance of the outbound emails and SMS, making it easy for them to communicate with us. That's the point of making the survey short, giving them a chance to give how they feel, what went wrong, and a little more feedback. And that's really the crux of where NPS was supposed to start. And we've sort of just taken it a step further and, advanced it a little bit more. And then I see one more. Would like to hear some examples from the healthcare industry. I would have to get my healthcare expert in here on this. He is not joining us tonight, but he's based in Austin. But certainly there are ways to leverage this, and healthcare is certainly a little tricky. I know in the U.S. and a lot of countries around the world with the privacy regulations. So things like the voting, you actually have to eliminate that when it comes to healthcare, because you can't have one customer looking, or one patient, shall I say, looking at another patient's needs. But the ideas behind churn risk still remain. The ideas of finding root cause still remain. So again, depending on the context, whether it's a hospital visit or whether it's a provider visit or something where we do have a little bit of experience with this question on my end, is certainly the insurance side, the health insurance side, the interactions with the insurance company. It works really well.
Ken, can I add just one more question to that, churn risk? So we have a lot of government services here. Customer happiness is a champion. So would you say that this will also benefit this government services?
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about government services is you really can't, it's almost impossible to have churn, I would guess. There are some places where some off examples I'm sure we can come up with. Certainly if you're talking about, if I think of New York City, you could use the bus or you could use the rail and defect from one or the other, use MTA versus the path or things like that. But when it comes to the churn risk, that churn risk really helps identify, it will help identify those that are just, I call it silently grumbling about the problems. They realize that they accept that they have to use those government services, but it really highlights the areas that service can improve upon to make the experience better. And honestly, one of the pluses of that within government services, it gives those employees that have to provide that service a way to say, hey, I know what I'm doing wrong now. And that's always been a limitation. Certainly, I won't name the postal carrier, but there's a postal carrier where, that it's government funded and it's regulated, but they just had no idea of how they could make the change because information was flowing in 6 months too late. Can you imagine getting your report 6 months after the customers were surveyed? I mean, certainly it makes it a little difficult to make a change because the problems evolve, I'd say about a week or two at a time here in the modern world. Whereas when you're getting a report 6 months later, it's really difficult to make an adjustment, really difficult to go on the fly and say, okay, well, we're going to fix this problem, even though we don't know what the problem is. We're just going to fix this problem because we think it's a problem. So this actually gives a little bit of insight that the frontline users on a government service could actually really leverage on a real-time basis and not without, not have the delays that usually come about with traditional reporting.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Kenneth.
I think there's one more that Praful was asking on behalf of one of his clients. Is there an easy mechanism to identify the root cause that needs to be fixed first in order to improve the NPS score significantly?
Yeah, absolutely. When you get the results for the root cause, they're going to pop out. And one of the great parts, the settings are one of those things that is often overlooked when you talk about a reporting widget. But you can actually set up the settings to show a 3-month trend of the root cause. So you can actually see what's moving. And I'll go back to that screen and share it a little bit because it sort of falls across 2 screens. So it's not as easy to see. One more. But you can actually see here, you can see the root cause down below. And if you have it set up to show the trended root cause as it is shown here on this slide, you can actually tie it back in with the trend up here and see what's moving and what changed from one month to the next to really say the improvements in one root cause actually helped bump the score, or perhaps the spike in a different root cause caused the score to decrease. And yeah, that's important to note. I should have said this before. Dan is still here hanging out if you have questions for Dan too. I don't want to monopolize the whole time.
Can I ask something?
Yes. Sorry,
So
Dan.
no issues,
No,
no
no,
issues.
okay. It's all good.
So, Mr. Kenneth, I just want to ask you how this can be extended for the service obtained remotely. So, can this be integrated with the existing customer apps?
With the existing customer experience platform? I'm not sure I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yes, this can be obtained in the existing customer experience platform. It's going to be, it's right now we only selectively roll it out because we want to make sure that we educate and train on how it works. So if you have an existing customer experience platform, you can reach out to me, and we're happy to set you up so that you can have access to this question and utilize it for your customers.
And we can also integrate it with their mobile app?
The mobile responses, yes. It actually was designed from a mobile first perspective, as most of our tools are. So it works really well for mobile response.
Thank you.
Another one that came in: does it make sense to implement this module in a B2B scenario? I would say absolutely, positively, 100% yes, mostly because our B2B clients, like many of you are QuestionPro's B2B clients, they have busy lives, and being able to get this kind of feedback on a regular, ongoing basis is a lot better than, say, a once-a-year feedback. And I bring this up, I'll talk about a little experience I have with a very large software company. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. I won't mention names, Redmond, Washington, but they surveyed their customers twice a year. And both times it was timed right after the release of the browser. And then the next time was timed right after the release of their new productivity suite update. So the results always seem to be a little gamed, as I'll call them. They actually, the product owners, the people in charge, because they had an incentive for this survey and the results, they actually sort of gamed the survey timing-wise to make sure it came out after those. One time, there was a little glitch in the browser that caused a huge security issue, and those scores tanked. So naturally, of course, those scores got thrown out because it wasn't really relevant at that point. So the reason I bring that up is it's easy to game a B2B survey that way. I also say it's easy to game employee experience in the same way. Let's survey them right after they get their raises, or unless the raises are bad, let's survey them right before they get their raises. But the idea of being able to go back to your customer a couple of times a year and not be blindsided is a huge factor in being able to provide that quick view. I mean, NPS in its infancy, when it started, had that insight in mind as well. I mean, a couple of the industries that they used NPS for were targeted because they were B2B industries. So they were able to bring it in, get that feedback on a more regular basis, rather than, as I say, you don't want to wait until the contract renewal to find out your customer's not happy with you.
Got it.
I don't.
Any other questions, guys, on the bridge?
Well, there is one thing that came to mind. Would you then replace, because NPS is, I would say, people are not really up for answering more on customer satisfaction. Would you replace that customer satisfaction with NPS? I mean, in what way should we, aim for either?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's moving away from asking customer satisfaction in favor of asking NPS.
Yes.
The there's about 1 billion research papers on this. I tend to wade in the middle. I have a former colleague, a good friend of mine, Timothy Cunningham, that has written extensively on this. And I was fortunate to be part of sort of that whole experience that he went through. He was actually very much I'll call it against the idea of NPS. Thought it simplified things too much. Thought it certainly had that reservation about the middle child syndrome, as I call it, the passives. What are you doing with the passives? But as he did more and more research, he certainly found that when you try to relate customer satisfaction or NPS, or even scores like customer effort score or likelihood of repurchase, all the major ones that have been used as either a proxy or a way to understand financial impact of that are relatively the same. I think the only one that tested actually higher, and I'm not necessarily advocating for any of this, an index score actually had a higher relationship to financial impact on a per customer basis than any other measure. Now, that being said, when it comes to NPS versus CSAT, a lot of that comes down to the interpretation of the geography, and B, the type of offer. I think in general, you could swap out easily NPS and customer sat, be able to index the two next to each other for a 3-month period, and be able to see where you should be and where you can set your targets from an NPS perspective versus CSAT. The other part of it is we offer both within our CX platform. So, I'd be doing a disservice if I said, oh, definitely one is better than the other. They all have their merits, they all have their values, and certainly if you're looking to switch one out for the other, I think NPS you tend to see a little bit more movement in the numbers because it's a ratio it's a ratio of your customers instead of an average score.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Kenneth.
Hi.
I just want to ask one question: that can we compare two products, or for example, two restaurants I have at different locations, that I can compare to this system?
Yeah, I mean, NPS, that probably one of the founding principles behind it is that even if those two locations are in two separate, even countries, the idea that you can just take the relative passives and promoters and detractors and be able to compare them against one another is part of the simplicity of NPS to begin with. But certainly, even within our root cause and our churn risk analysis, you're able to actually look at the root cause and look on a location by location basis and get down to that very fine level of detail, so that location A knows the top 3 things they need to work on, and location B might have 3 different things that they have to work on, even if as the company they might have a mix of the two.
Okay, thank you. One more question, Kenneth. I just want to know, looking at, these are the root causes that have been identified by the customer, right? And certain functions at our end are working, like in our organization, and they have the root causes because every root cause is linked with your function that is coming because of the recipe or your management or people attitude, right? You agree with it, right? So in your system with this QuestionPro survey, can we link it with our existing system that you said, yes, we can link it. Yeah. Can we link it with this survey that we can integrate in this way that these reports can go directly to the people who are linked to that function?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're talking about in Q1, although within this system, because it comes on the distributed dashboard, everyone that has a stake, whether it's a transaction owner, as we call it, someone that works in the branch, or what we call a product owner, they actually can get they have a stake, and they can actually look at the responses specific to their product, for example. And I'm going to use a very simple product. You know, in the US, you have multiple mobile phone providers, and then you have multiple devices that you can buy with those providers, and then multiple plans from each provider, you know, based on how much usage you might want. So a product manager, for, you know, a location manager that's selling those, will know how they serviced it, the information they provided, all those things. A product manager can also look at it at a group level and say, well, the phones that we're providing aren't making our customers happy. And so they're actually able to look at the dashboard from that perspective, from the perspective of the product side, and then apply that to the service side as well.
Thank you very much. I would love to learn more about this, Fred. Thank you. I'm in contact with the team. Thank you.
And I know I wanted to promise everyone, you know, 2 minutes to stand up and stretch. So I know we're coming up on that moment right now. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer it in the next minute. And then, oh, I did see one. We have a bank. We have NPS survey after transaction. We use color-coded NPS, red for detractors, green for promoters. Is it possible to keep the same color codes if we switch to NPS Plus, and do you recommend that? Yes, in fact, if you, I think, if I'm understanding the question correctly, if you look how we classify them, we pretty much have the same color scheme. It's pretty universal. So. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it back to Claire.
Thank you so much, Ken. We still do have another 5 minutes before our next session. We wanted to obviously give you a minute, as Ken said, to at least stand up and stretch. If you do still have questions in the meantime, please feel free to drop it in here with us. We still do have Dan and Ken here with us. And we have a very, very interesting topic coming up from one of our customers who's going to talk us through the success that they have been able to drive using our tools. So to stay on, give us another 3 or 4 minutes. We'll just take a quick break. And if there are any questions in the meantime, I think we'll be able to take it. Sorry, Ken, I think we do have one question here. Is there an impact on NPS from doing it online compared to doing it using Catty?
I would say almost definitively yes. The impact, though, varies by industry. We've obviously, being around CX research as long as I have, I've transitioned a lot of programs from Catty phone calls to online. In retailers, for example, when you tend to move online, the scores tend to go down. There are exceptions. If you are a technology company, if you're selling computers, TVs, and other electronic gadgets, the scores actually go up when you use technology, because people that like technology would prefer to answer via technology rather than answer a phone call. I think the other part is, in general, we're hitting a threshold where more people would rather answer online than by phone at this point. So sometimes there is that effect, depending on the industry you're in. Certainly, if you were doing if you're running a streaming company and you're calling people on the phone, and don't laugh, because a very large search company, I won't mention their name, but everyone uses it, actually still was doing Catty phone calls for their customers, because they didn't have email addresses for them. So